Vivien DuPont Whitmore slid the envelope across the marble kitchen island at exactly 6:47 on a Tuesday morning, her Cartier bracelet catching the light, her smile rehearsed to perfection. The kind of smile a woman wears when she believes she is about to destroy a man. Nathaniel Whitmore looked at the divorce papers. He looked at her smirk. He picked up his Mont Blanc pen, the one she'd given him on their 10th anniversary, and signed on every flagged line without reading a single word. Finally, he said, and the smirk died on her face. Because Vivien DuPont Whitmore had prepared for tears, for rage, for begging. She had not prepared for relief. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that Nathaniel had been waiting for this envelope for exactly 2 years, 3 months, and 11 days. He had known everything, and he had said nothing. If stories about the quiet wars inside beautiful marriages speak to something in you, stay with me. This one cuts deep. Understand, sir, the kitchen smelled like fresh espresso, and the end of something. Vivien DuPont Whitmore stood on the far side of the marble island in their Upper East Side brownstone, backlit by the pale November light that came through the bay windows every morning at exactly this hour. She wore a cream silk blouse, her dark hair pulled back in the effortless way that took her 45 minutes to achieve. Her posture was immaculate. Her Cartier bracelet, the love bracelet, the one Nathaniel had fastened onto her wrist on their 5th anniversary, caught the light when she moved her hand. She slid the manila envelope across the marble. "I think we both know this has been coming," she said. Her voice carried the practiced steadiness of a woman who had rehearsed this scene. In the mirror, in the car, in the quiet hours before dawn when she lay on her side of their California king and imagined his face when it broke. Nathaniel Whitmore looked at the envelope. He was still wearing his suit pants and a white undershirt, halfway through dressing for the office. His coffee sat untouched beside the stovetop. He was 44 years old, 6'1", still lean in the way that expensive trainers and morning runs along the East River maintained. His face was the kind that photographers liked at charity galas. Strong jaw, eyes that looked serious even when he smiled. He was not smiling now. He opened the envelope. The papers were thick, clipped neatly, flagged with yellow tabs where his signature was required. Monica Walsh's firm. Of course. Vivien had always chosen the best. Vivien watched him, waiting. Her chin lifted slightly, and there it was, the smirk. Small, controlled, designed to communicate a message. "I am the one doing this. I am the one with the power here. You will now feel what it means to lose me." Nathaniel reached into the breast pocket of the suit jacket draped over the chair beside him and withdrew his Mont Blanc pen, the Meisterstück she had given him on their 10th anniversary, engraved with his initials. He uncapped it, and he signed. Every yellow tab, one after another. He did not read the terms. He did not pause. He did not ask about custody, assets, the brownstone, the house in Sag Harbor. The pen moved with the calm efficiency of a man signing quarterly reports. When he finished, he placed the pen on top of the papers and looked at her. "Finally," he said. The word landed like a stone dropped into still water. It did not crash. It did not shatter. It simply sank, and the ripples changed everything. Vivien's smirk dissolved. Not slowly, not dramatically, but all at once, the way a mask slips when the hand holding it goes numb. Her lips parted. Her eyes, dark brown, sharp, always calculating, searched his face for the wound she had expected to find. The anger, the devastation, the desperate plea she had prepared herself to refuse. There was nothing. Nathaniel picked up his coffee and took a sip. It had gone cold, but he drank it anyway. He set the mug down, collected his jacket, shrugged it on, and adjusted his cuffs with the same mechanical precision he brought to every morning of their 12-year marriage. "I'll have Brian recommend someone for the Sag Harbor appraisal," he said, his voice flat, operational. "And I'll pick up Chloe from Westbrook at 3. It's my Tuesday." He walked past her toward the front door. Vivien stood frozen at the island. The signed papers fanned out before her like a hand of cards she had played wrong. "Nathaniel!" He stopped. His hand was on the doorknob. He did not turn around. You're not going to say anything? Her voice cracked. Not from sorrow. From confusion. From the vertigo of a woman who had pulled the pin on a grenade and watched it turn into smoke. Nathaniel opened the door. I just did, he said. And then he was gone, his footsteps fading down the brownstone stairs into the cold morning air of East 74th Street, leaving Vivien alone in a kitchen that still smelled like espresso and the quiet, devastating sound of a man who had been ready to leave long before she ever asked him to. _ 12 years earlier. Southampton, New York. The DuPont Whitmore introduction happened at the annual Whitmore Capital Summer Benefit, a white tent affair on the lawn of the Whitmore family estate in Southampton, where hedge fund managers drank Veuve Clicquot and pretended to care about the children's hospital the event nominally supported. Nathaniel was 32. He had been a vice president at the family firm for 3 years, groomed since Princeton for the trajectory his father, Edward Whitmore, had mapped out before Nathaniel could walk. He was good at his job. He was better at the performance his job required, the handshake, the smile, the ability to make a client feel heard while calculating their net worth in his head. He was also in love with someone else. Vanessa Drake was a journalist at the New York Observer, sharp-tongued and unimpressed by the world Nathaniel inhabited. They had been together for 2 years, secretly, because Edward Whitmore did not consider journalists appropriate. Vanessa was brilliant, warm, inconvenient. She did not fit the architecture of the life Nathaniel was expected to build. The DuPont girl, Edward said that evening, materializing beside Nathaniel with a scotch in hand and the directional certainty of a man who confused suggestion with command. Helene DuPont's daughter, Vivien. Columbia Law, but she's moved into art consulting. Family's old money, real money, not tech money. Her mother and your mother have been talking. Nathaniel followed his father's gaze across the tent. Vivien DuPont stood near the string quartet, holding a glass of champagne she hadn't sipped, listening to someone's wife describe a renovation. She was striking, dark-haired, angular, possessed of the kind of beauty that came from generations of careful breeding and quiet discipline. She looked, Nathaniel thought, like someone performing the same role he was, in a different costume. Their eyes met. She offered a small, polite smile. The smile of someone who understood exactly what was happening. He walked over. They talked. She was intelligent, guarded, and fluent in the unspoken grammar of their world. She did not flirt. She assessed. And in her assessment, Nathaniel saw something he recognized. A person measuring the distance between who they were and who they were expected to become. Your father sent you over, she said, not unkindly. Yes. My mother pointed you out an hour ago. I know. They looked at each other. 2 adults standing in the wreckage of a decision that had already been made for them, trying to find enough genuine feeling to survive it. Are you seeing someone? Vivien asked. Direct. No games. Yes, Nathaniel said. He did not lie. Not then. That came later. Vivien nodded. She took her first sip of champagne. So was I, she said. Past tense. The engagement was announced 4 months later. The New York Times ran it in the styles section. Edward Whitmore made a toast at the Rosewood Country Club that used the word legacy 4 times. Helene DuPont wore Chanel and wept with a precision that suggested rehearsal. Nathaniel ended things with Vanessa on a bench in Central Park. In October, when the leaves were the color of everything he was giving up. She did not cry. She looked at him with the steady, pitying gaze of a woman who understood she was not losing a man. She was watching one disappear. You'll regret this, Vanessa said. Not as a threat, as a diagnosis. The wedding was in June. The brownstone was purchased in July. The performance began in earnest, and for a while, a year, maybe 2, the performance felt close enough to reality that Nathaniel could almost forget the difference. Almost. _____2 years ago. October. It was a dry-cleaning errand that undid 12 years of silence. Vivien had asked him to drop off her winter coat, the camel Maxmara she wore every fall, on his way to the office. A small request, the kind of mundane domestic transaction that passes between married people like currency, unremarkable and instantly forgotten. Nathaniel checked the pockets before handing it over. Habit. Vivien always left things in her pockets. Lipstick, theater stubs, crumpled receipts from restaurants she'd visited with friends she described in enough detail that he'd stopped listening. The receipt was from the Archer Hotel, a boutique property in the West Village, small, discreet, the kind of place that did not ask questions. The charge was for one night. The date was a Thursday 3 weeks prior. A Thursday Vivien had told him she was at a gallery opening in Chelsea that ran late, so she'd stayed at Monica's apartment in Tribeca. Nathaniel stood on the sidewalk outside the dry cleaner on Madison Avenue, holding the receipt between his thumb and forefinger. The October wind pushed at his coat. A taxi honked. A woman walked past with a stroller. The world continued its ordinary machinery while Nathaniel Whitmore read a piece of paper that told him, in the blunt language of commerce, that his wife had lain in another man's bed. He did not feel the thing he expected to feel. He searched himself for rage, the hot, biblical fury that men were supposed to summon when their wives betrayed them. He reached for jealousy, for the sick lurch of imagining her body against someone else's. He waited for the crack, the break, the moment when the ground opens and grief rushes in like water. Nothing came. What he felt, standing on Madison Avenue with the receipt in his hand, was a vast, spreading clarity, the way a patient might feel when a doctor names the disease they have been carrying for years. Not shock. Recognition. So this is what it is. This is what we've become. He folded the receipt. He put it in his wallet behind his Amex Black, where it would stay for the next 2 years like a relic, proof of a truth he chose to carry alone. He did not confront Vivien that evening. He came home at 7, kissed Chloe goodnight, sat across from his wife at the dining table, and listened to her describe a client's penthouse renovation in Gramercy with the same attentive expression he wore at board meetings. Vivien spoke. Nathaniel nodded. The brownstone ticked with the mechanical rhythm of a household that functioned on schedule rather than feeling. In the weeks that followed, he noticed things. Not because he looked for them, because the receipt had adjusted his vision like a lens clicking into focus. The phone angled away at the table. The new perfume. Something warmer, richer. Not the Joe Malone she'd worn for years. The Thursday evenings that now carried their own gravitational pull, drawing Vivien out of the house with a brightness in her eyes he had not seen directed at him in a decade. He could have followed her. He could have hired someone. He could have checked her phone while she showered. He did none of these things. Instead, Nathaniel began to quietly restructure his life. He contacted a financial attorney, not through the firm, but through a Princeton classmate now practicing in Connecticut, far from Manhattan's gossip circuits. He reviewed the prenuptial agreement his father had insisted upon, identified its weaknesses and strengths. He moved assets into trusts earmarked for Chloe's education, Westbrook Academy, then college, then whatever she wanted. He made sure that when the architecture finally collapsed, his daughter would not be buried in the rubble. And he said nothing, not because he was strong, not because he was strategic, but because the truth, the one he could not speak to Brian, to his mother, to anyone, was simple and terrible. He was relieved. Vivien's affair meant the failure of their marriage was no longer theoretical. It was concrete, documented. It meant that one day someone would pull the trigger, and Nathaniel would not have to be the one who broke the arrangement, who disappointed Edward, who admitted that 12 years of performance had been exactly that. So he waited. He carried the receipt in his wallet, and he let the clock run. Present day. 3 hours after the signing. The Vasquez Gallery occupied the ground floor of a converted warehouse on West 22nd Street in Chelsea. Exposed brick, polished concrete, track lighting that made everything look deliberate. Rafael Vasquez had built the space from nothing 5 years ago, leveraging charm, taste, and a network of wealthy women who found his combination of aesthetic intelligence and physical beauty irresistible. He was 41, Dominican American, raised in Washington Heights, educated at RISD, possessed of the kind of confidence that came not from money but from knowing he was the most interesting person in any room and being, more often than not, correct. His hands were large, paint-stained even on days he hadn't painted, and when he touched Vivien's face, she felt something she had stopped believing she deserved, the sensation of being chosen rather than acquired. Vivien arrived at the gallery in an Uber she barely remembered ordering. She'd left the brownstone 20 minutes after Nathaniel, walking through the kitchen where the signed divorce papers still lay spread across the marble like a surgical site. She'd picked them up, placed them in the envelope, and set the envelope on the hallway table beside a vase of white peonies the housekeeper refreshed every Monday. Then she'd stood in the foyer for a long time, doing nothing. She had expected to feel victorious. She had spent 6 weeks preparing, the attorney consultations, the asset inventory, the calculated timing of a Tuesday morning when Nathaniel would be half-dressed and vulnerable. She had chosen the cream blouse because it photographed well in her memory. She had practiced the smile. What she had not prepared for was the absence of impact. Nathaniel had signed the papers the way he signed everything, efficiently, without sentiment, as though the dissolution of their 12-year marriage was a closing document for a mid-tier acquisition. Finally, the word echoed. Not the word itself, the tone. The way he'd said it without weight, without irony, without even the courtesy of bitterness. As if he'd been waiting, as if he'd been ready. "You look like someone stole your thunder," Raphael said when she walked in. He was hanging a new piece, abstract, red and black, aggressive, on the gallery's east wall, his sleeves rolled to the elbows. "He signed them," Vivien said. She set her bag on his desk, a cluttered surface she knew better than her own vanity. "He didn't even read them." Raphael lowered the painting. He looked at her, really looked, the way he always did, the way that had undone her 2 years ago at the opening where they'd met, when he'd studied her face as though it were a canvas worth understanding. "Isn't that what you wanted?" He said, "Finally." That's all he said. "Finally." Raphael leaned against the wall. He crossed his arms. She could see him processing, not with Nathaniel's cold efficiency, but with the slow, instinctive read of a man who navigated the world through feeling rather than calculation. "Maybe he meant it," Raphael said. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't angry. He wasn't anything. "Vivien." He signed with the pen I gave him, the anniversary pen. He used it like it was a Bic. She was pacing now, her heels clicking against the concrete, moving between the paintings that lined the walls. Raphael watched her with an expression she had never seen on his face before. Caution. "Come here," he said. She stopped. She looked at him, and for the first time since the affair began. Since that first night at the Archer Hotel when Raphael had kissed her in the elevator and she'd felt her entire body remember what it meant to be alive. Vivien saw something in his eyes that unsettled her. He looked uncertain. "What happens now?" he asked. Not eagerly. Not the way a man asks when the obstacle has been removed and the path is clear. He asked it the way a man asks when he realizes the fantasy is about to become reality, and reality has weight. Vivien opened her mouth. Closed it. She realized, standing in the gallery where she had felt most herself for 2 years, that she did not have an answer. The affair had been a closed system, self-contained, pressurized by secrecy, made electric by the stolen hours and the risk. It existed in opposition to her marriage. It required her marriage to function. Without the marriage, what was it? She looked at Raphael. He looked at her. The painting on the east wall blazed red and black behind him, and the gallery was silent except for the hum of the climate control system and the distant sound of a truck on 22nd Street. "I don't know," she said, and the silence that followed was unlike any silence they had shared before. Not charged, not intimate, but hollow. Sir 18 months ago. Whitmore Capital, 40th floor. Manhattan. The office of Nathaniel Whitmore occupied the northeast corner of the Whitmore Capitol Tower on Park Avenue, floor-to-ceiling glass, a view of the Chrysler Building that clients found reassuring, a desk kept deliberately sparse. On that desk, in a locked drawer only Nathaniel accessed, sat a folder labeled Personal, Estate Review. Inside the folder were the following: a copy of the prenuptial agreement signed by both parties in June of 12 years ago, correspondence with Andrew Bellamy, a family attorney in Greenwich, Connecticut, a revised asset allocation that moved $4.2 million into an irrevocable trust for Chloe, and a handwritten timeline of Vivien's Thursday evenings, recorded not with the obsession of a jealous husband, but with the detached methodology of an analyst tracking a market position. Nathaniel had been preparing for this divorce the way he prepared for hostile acquisitions. Quietly, comprehensively, without emotion. Stephanie Moore, his executive assistant, noticed the change before anyone else. Not the locked drawer or the calls to Connecticut. Stephanie was too professional to pry. But the rhythm. Nathaniel had always worked late. Now he left at 5:30 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He attended every Westbrook Academy parent event. He took Chloe to breakfast at Café Lumière on Saturday mornings, just the two of them, and returned looking more human than Stephanie had seen him in years. "You seem lighter," she told him once, setting his afternoon coffee on the desk. "I'm simplifying," he said, which was both true and the largest understatement of his adult life. The prenuptial agreement was the architecture of everything. Edward Whitmore, who had died of a heart attack 3 years ago, controlling the family even in the specifics of his estate plan, had insisted on a prenup that protected the Whitmore assets aggressively. If the marriage dissolved, the Whitmore fortune stayed Whitmore. Vivien would receive the brownstone, a negotiated settlement and spousal support, generous by any standard but a fraction of the empire. But the prenup had a clause, Section 12, Paragraph C, that Edward's attorneys had inserted as a moral cudgel. In the event of proven infidelity by either party, the offending spouse forfeited the right to contest the financial terms. It was a clause designed for a world where marriages were contracts and betrayal had a price listed in fine print. Nathaniel had the receipt from the Archer Hotel. He had the pattern of Thursday absences. If he wanted, he could hire a private investigator, collect irrefutable evidence, and invoke Section 12. Vivien would walk away with almost nothing. He chose not to. This was the part no one would understand, not Brian Cooper, who had urged him to protect yourself during a whiskey-soaked evening at the Sapphire Lounge. Not Bellamy, who had outlined the strategic advantage of invoking the infidelity clause. Not the ghost of Edward Whitmore, who would have considered his son's restraint a form of weakness. Nathaniel did not invoke the clause because he understood something about power that his father never had. The most devastating thing you can do to someone who expects a war is refuse to fight one. He wanted the divorce to be clean. He wanted Vivien to have the brownstone. He had never loved it, not really. It was a set piece, a stage for a life that had been cast before he auditioned. He wanted Chloe to see her parents dissolve with dignity, without the courtroom theater that had defined his own parents' nearly public separation when he was 14. A separation that was papered over and never acknowledged, leaving Nathaniel to grow up in a household where silence was the only language anyone spoke fluently. He would not repeat that silence with Chloe, but he would use it one last time to let Vivien believe she was the one in control. Let her file. Let her choose the attorney, the timing, the narrative. Let her believe she was leaving a man who didn't know, who was blindsided, who would crumble. And when the papers came, when she slid them across the marble with that rehearsed smirk, he would sign them, immediately, without theater, and she would understand, in the hollow silence that followed, that the power she thought she held had never been hers at all. It was, Nathaniel knew, a cruel mercy, or a merciful cruelty. He was no longer sure of the difference, but it was the only form of honesty he had left. Present day. 3:07 p.m. Westbrook Academy. Chloe Whitmore was 11 years old and too smart for her own protection. She stood at the pickup circle outside Westbrook Academy's limestone facade on East 85th Street, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her dark hair, her mother's hair, pulled into a ponytail that was already coming undone. She was reading a book, which was what Chloe did when she was trying to look like she wasn't watching everything. Nathaniel pulled the black Audi to the curb at exactly 3:07. He was never late for pickup. This was not a recent development. He had restructured his afternoons 18 months ago to ensure it, but the consistency had become, for Chloe, a fixed point in a world she could feel shifting beneath her. "Hey, kid. Hey!" She climbed in, buckled her seatbelt, kept reading. Nathaniel pulled into traffic. The November light was already thinning, the kind of late afternoon gray that made Manhattan feel like a photograph someone had desaturated. He glanced at Chloe in the rearview mirror. She was not reading. Her eyes were fixed on the same page. How was school? Fine. Mrs. Patterson's history class? Fine. The fine wall. Nathaniel knew it well, had built his own version of it at the same age, sitting in the back of his father's town car, answering questions with the monosyllabic efficiency of a child who had learned that adults asked how you were without wanting a real answer. He drove toward the brownstone, then changed his mind. He took a left on Park, headed south. "Where are we going?" Chloe asked, looking up.
Café Lumière.
Saturday tradition on a Tuesday. She studied him, 11 years old, but her gaze had the diagnostic precision of a cardiologist, scanning for arrhythmias, irregularities, signs of distress. She had been doing this for months. Nathaniel did not know exactly what Chloe knew, but he understood, with the gut certainty of a parent, that she knew something. Café Lumière was a narrow French café on East 72nd, all brass fixtures and chalkboard menus and the smell of butter and espresso. It was their place, Nathaniel and Chloe's, a space that existed outside the choreography of the brownstone. They sat at their usual table by the window, ordered croissants and hot chocolate for Chloe, a double espresso for Nathaniel. For several minutes, neither spoke. The café murmured around them, silverware, a French-language jazz playlist, a woman laughing at the counter. Chloe tore a piece from her croissant but did not eat it. "Dad." "Yeah. Are you and Mom getting divorced?" The question arrived without preamble, without the careful build-up an adult would construct. Children do not negotiate with truth, they state it and wait. Nathaniel set down his espresso. He looked at his daughter. She was watching him with an expression that broke something inside him. Not fear, not sadness, but a weary resignation that no 11-year-old should possess. The expression of a child who has been listening through walls. "Yes," he said, because the silence that had defined his marriage would not define his relationship with his daughter. Because Chloe deserved a parent who answered. She nodded. The nod was small, controlled, an eerie echo of Vivien's composure. Then her lip trembled, and she was 11 again. "Is it because of that man?" she said. The café sounds faded. Nathaniel felt the air leave his lungs. "What man, sweetheart?" "The one Mom talks to on the phone, when she thinks I'm asleep." Chloe's voice was steady, but her eyes were filling. "She laughs different, like she used to laugh." Nathaniel reached across the table and took his daughter's hand. It was small and warm, and she gripped his fingers the way she had when she was 4 and afraid of thunderstorms. He wanted to lie. Every instinct in him, the Whitmore training, the years of performance, the reflexive protection of a man raised to believe that composure was the highest virtue, told him to deflect, to reassure, to say your mother and I just need some time apart. "Your mom and I haven't been happy together for a long time," he said instead. "That's not your fault. It was never your fault. And it doesn't change how much we both love you. But the man, grown-up problems have grown-up reasons, and most of them started long before you were born. The only thing you need to know is that I'm here. Tuesday pickup. Saturday croissants. Always." Chloe pulled her hand back. She wiped her eyes with her sleeve, a gesture so fiercely private that Nathaniel looked away to give her the dignity of it. "Can I have another hot chocolate?" she asked. "You can have 3. She almost smiled. It was enough. Outside the cafe window, Manhattan moved in its relentless current. Taxis, pedestrians, the long shadows of late autumn. And inside, a father and daughter sat in the quiet wreckage of a family, holding onto the one piece that still felt real. Underscore present day. For days after the signing. Law offices of Walsh and Kirkland, Midtown Manhattan. The conference room on the 32nd floor of Walsh and Kirkland was designed to intimidate. Mahogany table, floor-to-ceiling windows facing 6th Avenue. A silence so polished it felt architectural. Monica Walsh had chosen this room deliberately. She knew the psychology of negotiation the way a surgeon knows the geography of the chest. Where to cut, how deep, what to avoid if you wanted the patient conscious. Monica sat at the head of the table, files arranged before her with surgical precision. She was 46, red-haired, impeccably dressed in charcoal Armani, and she had been Vivien's closest friend since Columbia Law. Their friendship existed in the specific register of women who had survived the same institutions, shorthand, loyalty, the shared understanding that in their world, sentiment was a luxury and strategy was a necessity. Vivien sat to Monica's right. She wore black, deliberately, funerally, and her face carried the composed blankness of a woman still recalibrating after a shock she could not name. Across the table sat Nathaniel, and beside him, a man Vivien had never seen. Andrew Bellamy, mid-50s, silver-haired. The quiet, rumpled authority of a man who did not practice law in Manhattan because he did not need to impress anyone. Monica opened. We've prepared a comprehensive proposal for the division of marital assets, custody arrangement for the minor child, and spousal support terms consistent with the standard of living established during the marriage. She slid the document across. The brownstone, the Sag Harbor property, and a monthly support figure we believe is more than equitable. Bellamy did not touch the document. He looked at Nathaniel. Nathaniel nodded. My client accepts the brownstone allocation to Mrs. Whitmore, Bellamy said. He also accepts the Sag Harbor transfer, pending independent appraisal. Spousal support as outlined is agreeable. He paused. The pause was a weapon, and everyone in the room recognized it. However, Monica's pen stopped moving. There is the matter of the prenuptial agreement, Bellamy continued. He withdrew a single sheet of paper from his briefcase, a photocopy of Section 12, Paragraph C, highlighted in yellow. Specifically, the infidelity clause. The room temperature dropped. Vivien's eyes moved to Nathaniel. He was looking at the window, at the 6th Avenue skyline, at anything that was not her face. His expression was neutral, empty. The same expression he had worn when he signed the papers 4 days ago. Monica took the sheet. Read it. Her composure held, but Vivien, who had known Monica for 20 years, saw the shift. The slight tightening of the jaw, the recalculation happening behind her eyes. This clause, Monica said carefully, requires documented proof of infidelity. Allegations are insufficient under. Bellamy reached into his briefcase again. This time he withdrew a hotel receipt. Aged, creased, carried in a wallet for 2 years. The Archer Hotel. A Thursday. Vivien's name was not on it, but the date matched a night she had told Nathaniel she was at Monica's. Then a second document. A record of Vivien's credit card charges, subpoenaed quietly, showing a pattern of charges at the Archer Hotel on 12 separate Thursday evenings over 22 months. My client, Bellamy said, has been aware of Mrs. Whitmore's extramarital relationship for approximately 2 years. Silence. Vivien turned to Nathaniel. He was still looking at the window, but now she could see it. The faintest tension in his jaw, the cost of this moment registering somewhere beneath the surface he had spent a lifetime fortifying. You knew, she said. Not a question. He turned, looked at her. Yes. For 2 years. Yes. And you said nothing? The question hung between them, loaded with 12 years of marriage, 12 years of silence, 12 years of two people who had never once spoken honestly to each other in a room that wasn't full of other people. The clause won't be invoked, Nathaniel said quietly. He addressed this to Monica, not Vivien. I'm not using it. The terms your client proposed are acceptable. I wanted her to know that I could have, and that I chose not to. He stood, buttoned his jacket, looked at Vivien one last time. This was never about winning, Vivien, he said. It was about being done. He left the conference room. Bellamy followed, collecting his briefcase with the unhurried movements of a man whose work was complete. Vivien sat in the silence that remained. Monica was speaking, something about next steps, filing timelines, procedural matters, but the words were noise, static, the meaningless machinery of dissolution. He had known. For 2 years. He had watched her lie, watched her leave on Thursday evenings, watched her return with another man's warmth still in her skin, and he had said nothing. He had let her believe she was deceiving him, let her build the narrative of the unhappy wife and the oblivious husband, let her rehearse the smirk and the envelope and the power of being the one who leaves. And he had been ready the entire time. She felt, for the first time in their marriage, truly seen by Nathaniel Whitmore. And the feeling was unbearable. Present day. That same evening, the Sapphire Lounge occupied the basement level of a converted townhouse on East 61st Street. Dim lighting, leather banquettes, a jazz trio that played standards with the respectful restraint of musicians who understood their audience came to drink, not listen. It was the kind of bar where men like Nathaniel Whitmore went to be alone in company, surrounded by the soft clink of crystal and the murmur of conversations designed to reveal nothing. Brian Cooper was already at their usual booth when Nathaniel arrived. Brian was 46, broad-shouldered, divorced 3 years ago from a woman named Angela who now lived in Westchester with a real estate developer and Brian's 2 sons on alternating weekends. He was Nathaniel's oldest friend, Princeton, then the same analyst cohort at Goldman before Nathaniel moved to the family firm, and the only person in Nathaniel's life who had earned the right to say uncomfortable things. "You look like a man who just dropped a bomb and forgot to run," Brian said, sliding a whiskey across the table. Nathaniel sat, drank. The bourbon was warm and expensive and did absolutely nothing. "She knows," he said. "That you knew. Everything. The receipt. The credit card pattern. 2 years of it." Brian exhaled. He leaned back against the leather and studied his friend with the practiced concern of a man who had watched his own marriage disintegrate and recognized the architecture of demolition. "How'd she take it?" "She looked at me like she'd never seen me before." "Maybe she hadn't." Nathaniel turned the glass in his hands. The jazz trio shifted into something by Coltrane, slow, searching, the saxophone wandering through a melody it kept almost finding and then releasing. "Brian." "Yeah. I need to say something I've never said out loud." Brian waited. The booth was a confessional, dim, enclosed, the noise of the bar forming a wall of privacy around them. "I didn't stay silent because I was strategic," Nathaniel said. The words came slowly, extracted like something embedded. "I didn't stay silent because I was protecting Chloe, or managing the financial exposure, or waiting for the right moment. Those are the reasons I told myself. Those are the reasons I put in the folder." He paused. The saxophone held a note that ached. "I stayed silent because saying something would have meant admitting the marriage was real, that it mattered, that losing it meant something." He looked at Brian. "And I couldn't do that, because if it mattered, if those 12 years were actually a marriage and not just an arrangement, then I wasted them. I let them happen to me. I stood there while my father picked the venue and the bride and the life, and I signed on the line the same way I signed those divorce papers. Without reading, without choosing." The glass was empty. Nathaniel did not refill it. Confronting Vivien about the affair would have meant caring, and caring would have meant that I had something real to lose. And I couldn't afford that, Brian, because if it was real, then I failed. I didn't just go through the motions of a fake marriage. I abandoned a real one. Brian was quiet for a long time. The trio finished the Coltrane piece and moved into something quieter. "Did you love her?" Brian asked. "Ever? I don't know. The honesty of it was brutal. I think I loved what she represented, the possibility that the arrangement could become real, that if I performed long enough, the performance would become genuine. But I never reached for her. I never fought for it. I just showed up." "And Vanessa?" The name landed like a stone in still water. Nathaniel had not spoken Vanessa Drake's name in Brian's presence for years. Vanessa was real, Nathaniel said. That's why I let her go. Because real things don't survive the world my father built. Brian leaned forward. He put his hand on Nathaniel's forearm, a gesture between men that carried more weight than an embrace. Nate, you let your father choose your wife, your career, your address, and your silence. He's been dead for 3 years. When are you going to stop letting him choose the rest? The jazz trio stopped playing. In the silence between sets, the bar murmured its low, liquid hum, and Nathaniel sat with Brian's question the way he sat with everything that mattered. Absorbing it, cataloging it, placing it in the locked drawer of things he was not yet ready to open. But for the first time he felt the lock give. Past and present. Intercut. Past. 2 years and 3 months ago. The Metropolitan Gallery, Chelsea. The first time Vivien DuPont Whitmore saw Rafael Vasquez, he was arguing with a lighting technician about the angle of a spot on a canvas. A 6-foot abstract in ochre and violet that he insisted needed to be hit from the left, not the right, because the painting was about longing, and longing always reaches toward what it cannot see. She had come to the opening alone. Nathaniel was in Chicago, a client dinner or a conference, or one of the interchangeable obligations that had replaced his presence in her life so gradually she could not pinpoint the moment he became an absence rather than a person. She wore a black dress she had bought for herself, not for an event, and she drank her wine slowly, watching this man argue about light with the passion of someone who believed it mattered. Rafael noticed her the way he noticed everything, not all at once, but in accumulating detail. The way she stood apart from the crowd. The way she held her glass like a shield. The way her eyes moved across the paintings with genuine attention, not the performative scanning of someone who would ask the price. "You're not here for the networking," he said, appearing beside her. "Is that a question? An observation? People who actually look at the art are rare. Maybe the art is actually good." He smiled. It was not Nathaniel's smile, controlled, calibrated, deployed. It was reckless, generous. The smile of a man who had not been trained to ration himself. They talked for 2 hours. He told her about growing up in Washington Heights, about his mother who cleaned offices in Midtown, about the scholarship to RISD that felt like being handed a passport to a country where everyone spoke a language he was still learning. She told him about the brownstone that felt like a museum, about the daughter she adored, about the husband who was technically present and emotionally on another continent. She did not plan what happened next. That was the part she would tell herself later, in the shower, in the car, in the long minutes before sleep. I did not plan this. As if the absence of premeditation absolved her. As if stumbling into betrayal was different from walking. Present. 5 days after the signing, Vivien sat on the edge of Raphael's bed in his apartment above the gallery. A loft space cluttered with canvases, turpentine-stained rags, books stacked on every horizontal surface. She had been here hundreds of times. She had memorized the geography of this room the way she had once memorized the layout of the brownstone. By feel, by repetition, by the slow accumulation of intimacy that comes from being somewhere often enough that your body knows it before your mind does. But tonight the room felt different, unfamiliar, as though someone had moved all the furniture 2 inches to the left. He knew the whole time, she said. She had said this before, to Monica, to herself, to the mirror in her bathroom. But the words had not yet lost their charge. 2 years. He sat across from me at dinner. He kissed Chloe goodnight. He asked about my day. And he knew. Raphael sat in the chair by the window, painting shirt unbuttoned, watching her with the careful attention of a man trying to determine whether the woman in front of him was the woman he thought he knew. "What did you want him to do?" he asked. The question was not rhetorical. It was a genuine interrogation, the kind Raphael specialized in, the kind that cut through the narrative to the nerve. "I wanted him to care," Vivien said. "I wanted him to be angry. I wanted him to fight, to scream, to throw something, to show me that 12 years meant something to him. Anything. Any reaction that proved I was married to a human being and not a..." She stopped. "Not a machine. And instead he signed. He signed like he was closing a deal. Raphael was quiet for a moment. Then, Vivien, did you start this? Us because you wanted to leave him? Or because you wanted him to stop you? She felt the question land. It was precise, surgical, and it opened something she had kept sealed for 2 years behind the justification of I deserve happiness and the marriage was already dead. Because the truth, the one she had not spoken to Monica, to her therapist, to anyone, was that the affair had begun as an act of provocation. Not consciously, not strategically, but somewhere in the architecture of her decisions, Vivien had chosen a man who was vivid, visible, traceable. She had left receipts in coat pockets. She had taken calls when Chloe might hear. She had not been as careful as she believed, because some part of her did not want to be careful. She had wanted to be caught. She had wanted Nathaniel to storm into the gallery, to grab Raphael by the collar, to look at her with eyes that burned with something, anything, that proved the man she married was capable of feeling. And he had done nothing. He had folded the receipt into his wallet and continued eating dinner. I don't know, she whispered.
Raphael stood.
He crossed the room and sat beside her. He did not touch her. I love you, he said, but I need to know if you love me, or if you love what I represent, the opposite of him. She turned to look at him. His face was open, vulnerable, stripped of the confidence that defined him in public. She saw, for the first time, the cost of being someone's rebellion, the exhausting work of being wanted not for who you are, but for who you are not. I need time, she said. He nodded. But his eyes said what his mouth did not. Time is how people say goodbye slowly. Present day. 12 days after the signing.
Café Lumière.
It was a Saturday, and Nathaniel was alone. Chloe was with Vivien this weekend, the informal schedule they had established while the formal custody arrangement wound through legal channels. The brownstone was divided by invisible borders now. Vivien occupied the master bedroom and the second-floor study. Nathaniel had moved into the guest room on the third floor. They passed each other in hallways with the choreographed distance of strangers sharing a hotel corridor. Café Lumière was quiet at 9 a.m. The weekend crowd hadn't arrived yet, and the Saturday light came through the front windows in long, buttery rectangles that fell across the marble tabletops. Nathaniel sat at his usual spot by the window, the one he shared with Chloe, and read the Times without absorbing a word. He did not see Vanessa Drake enter. He felt her, the way the air changed when someone who once occupied the center of your life walks back into its periphery. Nathaniel! He looked up, and there she was, 15 years older than the woman on the Central Park bench, but unmistakably herself. The sharp green eyes, the dark auburn hair now threaded with silver she didn't bother concealing, the direct gaze that had always made him feel both seen and transparent. Vanessa Drake at 47 carried herself differently than Vanessa Drake at 32. The ambitious journalist had become an executive editor at an independent media company. The angular hunger in her face had softened into something more settled. Not complacent, but resolved. The look of a woman who had built a life she chose rather than one she was given. Vanessa! He stood, instinctively, the manners bred into him overriding the shock. What are you doing here? I live 4 blocks away. Moved back to the Upper East Side last year. She gestured to the counter. I come here most Saturdays. The coincidence was so clean, so impossibly scripted, that Nathaniel almost laughed. Café Lumière, the place he had chosen as his sanctuary, his Chloe place, his one space that belonged to the present, had been Vanessa's neighborhood cafe for a year. Can I sit? She asked. Please. She ordered a courte-deux. They sat across from each other at the small marble table, and the 15 years between their last conversation and this one compressed into the space of a breath. I heard about you and Vivien, Vanessa said, directly. No preamble. It was the thing he had always loved and feared about her, the refusal to orbit a subject when she could land on it. It's not public yet. It's Manhattan. Nothing has to be public to be known. She sipped her courte-deux. Are you okay? The question was simple. It should not have undone him. But it did because Vanessa asked it the way no one else in his life did. Without agenda, without judgment, without the performance of concern. She asked it because she wanted to know. "I'm relieved," he said. And then, because it was Vanessa, because she had always been the place where his honesty lived. "And I'm ashamed of being relieved. Because you think relief means you didn't try. Because I didn't try. That's the truth. I knew she was having an affair for 2 years and I did nothing. Not because I was being noble or strategic. Because I was grateful. Grateful someone else had pulled the pin so I didn't have to." Vanessa set down her cup. She looked at him with an expression that carried the specific gravity of shared history. Not nostalgia, not longing, but recognition. "You never wanted to marry her," Vanessa said.
No.
"You wanted to marry me." The sentence sat between them on the marble table like a document neither had signed. Nathaniel looked at Vanessa, at the woman who had been real in a world of arrangements, and felt the 12 years he had spent performing the role of Nathaniel Whitmore, dutiful son, crack open like a fault line. "I wanted a life I was too afraid to choose," he said. Vanessa did not reach across the table. She did not offer comfort or absolution. She sat with his words the way she sat with difficult stories as an editor, absorbing them, weighing them, giving them the respect of not being immediately resolved. "I'm not the same person, Nate," she said quietly. "Neither are you. That bench in Central Park, that was a lifetime ago. You can't go back to the place you never left from." "I know. Do you?" He didn't answer. Outside the window, a woman pushed a stroller past the cafe, and for a moment Nathaniel saw Vivien, young Vivien 12 years ago, carrying newborn Chloe through the brownstone door for the first time, looking at him with an expression he now recognized as hope. She had hoped too. She had tried too. And he had let her try alone. "I failed her, Vanessa," he said. "Not because I stayed silent about the affair. Because I was never there. I gave her a house and a schedule and a name, and I kept everything that mattered locked in a drawer." Vanessa finished her court adieu. She stood, put on her coat, a navy wool that suited her, chosen by her, for her, and looked down at him. "Then don't lock it anymore," she said. "Not for me. Not for Vivien. For you." She left. The bell above the door chimed. Nathaniel sat in the Saturday light of Café Lumière, alone at a table for two, and felt, for the first time in 12 years, the full, unmediated weight of his own choices. Present day. 3 weeks after the signing. The brownstone Upper East Side. Chloe was at a sleepover at her friend Isabel's apartment on Park Avenue. The housekeeper had left at 5. The brownstone was empty in the way only large, expensive homes can be empty. Every room immaculate, every surface polished, the silence not an absence of sound but a presence of its own, thick and architectural, pressing against the walls like something that had been building for years. Vivien was in the kitchen when Nathaniel came downstairs. She was sitting at the marble island, the same island where she had slid the divorce papers 3 weeks ago. With a glass of red wine she was not drinking. She wore no makeup. Her hair was down. She looked younger without the armor, and older too, the way people do when they stop performing and let their face settle into the truth. Nathaniel stopped in the doorway. He had come down for water. He had not expected to find her here, in the kitchen, at 10 o'clock at night, sitting in the dim light of the under-cabinet fixtures with a glass of wine and an expression he had never seen her wear. Not composure, not defiance, not the practiced blankness of their daily coexistence, but something raw and unfinished, like a painting before the final layer. "Sit down," she said. He should have gone back upstairs. Every protocol of their current arrangement, the invisible borders, the coordinated schedules, the elaborate choreography of two people dissolving a life without ever being in the same room long enough to feel it, said he should nod politely and retreat. He sat. The marble island stretched between them. 3 weeks ago it had been a stage for theater, the smirk, the pen, the word finally. Now it was just a cold surface with nothing on it. Vivien pushed the wine bottle toward him. He poured a glass. The wine was a Barolo, expensive, complex, the kind they used to share on Friday nights before Friday nights became another thing that quietly disappeared. Neither spoke for a long time. The brownstone creaked around them, the old bones of a building that had witnessed a century of families performing happiness within its walls. I ended things with Raphael, Vivien said. Nathaniel looked at her. Her face gave nothing away, but her hands, wrapped around the wine glass stem with more pressure than the glass required, told the truth. When? He asked. Last week. She paused. He asked me whether I loved him or loved what he wasn't. I couldn't answer, and not being able to answer was the answer. Nathaniel absorbed this. He did not feel relief or vindication, or the bitter satisfaction of a man watching his wife's affair collapse. He felt tired, the kind of tired that sleep does not repair, the fatigue of 12 years of emotional absence catching up to him all at once, demanding payment. I need to ask you something, Vivien said, and I need you to answer honestly. Not the Whitmore version of honestly, not the version that's technically true but strategically deployed. The real version. Okay. Why didn't you ever fight for us? The question filled the kitchen. It expanded into the hallway, up the stairs, into the guest room where Nathaniel slept, into the master bedroom where Vivien lay awake each night, into the walls that held 12 years of carefully maintained silence. Because fighting would have meant admitting it was real, he said. And admitting it was real would have meant admitting I'd wasted it. Vivien's eyes filled. Not dramatically. Not the cinematic tears of their social circle's divorce proceedings, but quietly, the way water rises in a glass, slow and inevitable. So you let me drown, she said. Yes. You watched me become so lonely in this marriage that I went looking for someone to make me feel alive. And you knew. And you, yes. That's worse than what I did, Nathaniel. Her voice cracked. Do you understand that? What I did was selfish. What you did was cruel. You let me humiliate myself. You let me sneak around like a criminal in my own marriage while you cataloged receipts and restructured your portfolio. You made me the villain of a story you could have changed. He deserved it. Every word. He sat with it the way he sat with everything. Absorbing the impact, letting it settle into bone. You're right, he said. Don't do that. Don't agree with me like you're managing a client. Talk to me. For once in 12 years. Talk to me like I'm a person you were married to. The command broke something open. The locked drawer. The folder. The receipt he still carried in his wallet. The ghost of his father's voice saying composure. Nathaniel. Composure. The Central Park bench and the woman he let go. The Saturday mornings at Café Lumière trying to be a father because he had failed at being a husband. All of it. Every sealed compartment, every controlled silence. Every night he lay in the guest room staring at the ceiling and feeling nothing because feeling nothing was the only alternative to feeling everything. Cracked open. I was afraid, he said. His voice was low, unsteady, foreign to his own ears. I have been afraid for my entire adult life. Of my father. Of this family. Of the fact that I never chose any of it, the firm, the house, you, and that makes me complicit in every single day we spent pretending. I didn't fight for us because I didn't know how. Because no one in my family fights for anything. We manage it, we endure it, we sign on the line and call it duty. Vivien was crying now. Not sobbing. Just tears, steady and silent, streaming down a face stripped of every defense she had spent a lifetime constructing. I needed you, she whispered. I needed you and you were right there and you gave me nothing. I know. And now it's too late. He looked at her. She looked at him. The kitchen was dark except for the cabinet lights, and in that dim amber glow, Nathaniel saw his wife, truly saw her, for the first time since the Hamptons benefit 12 years ago, when they'd stood under a white tent and recognized in each other the same quiet desperation of people living the lives they'd been assigned. Was there ever a moment, he asked, when it could have been real? She wiped her face with the back of her hand. A graceless gesture. The most honest thing she'd done in his presence in years. Chloe's birth, she said. When the nurse put her in your arms and you looked at me and said we made something that's ours. That was real. He remembered. The hospital room. The weight of his daughter. The belief, brief and blinding, that the arrangement had produced something genuine. That was real, he agreed. They sat with it, the single moment of truth in 12 years of performance. It was not enough to rebuild on. They both knew that, but it was enough to grieve. I don't hate you, Vivien, Nathaniel said. I wish I did. It would be simpler. I don't hate you either, she said. I hate that I understand you. I hate that I know exactly why you did what you did, because I did the same thing. I performed, I pretended, I built a secret life instead of demanding a real one. We failed the same way, Nathaniel. We just failed in different directions. The Barolo was finished. The bottle stood empty between them. Outside, a siren passed on Fifth Avenue, distant and fading, and the brownstone settled into its nighttime quiet. The creak of old wood, the hum of the heating system, the sounds of a house that would soon belong to someone else. Sign the final papers, Vivien said, and let's do the one thing we never managed in 12 years. What? Let each other go honestly. He nodded. She nodded. And they sat together in the dark kitchen for a while longer, not as husband and wife, not as adversaries, but as two people who had finally stopped pretending long enough to see each other clearly, and who understood, in the terrible clarity of that seeing, that clarity had come too late. _ 1 month later. December. Manhattan. The brownstone sold in 11 days. A tech executive from San Francisco bought it. Sight unseen, cash offer, the kind of transaction that happened in Manhattan the way weather happened, impersonally and without sentiment. Vivien oversaw the staging with the efficiency that had defined her career in art consulting. Walls repainted in fashionable neutrals, personal photographs removed, the spaces emptied of everything that made them theirs. When the listing went live, the brownstone looked like a place where no one had ever lived, which Nathaniel thought when he saw the photos online was perhaps more accurate than the realtor intended. He had moved into an apartment in the Meridian, a glass and steel building on the west side, modern, clean-lined, devoid of the brownstone's Victorian weight. His corner unit on the 14th floor looked out over the Hudson. The light was different here, wider, colder, the river catching the December sky in shifting patterns of gray and silver. He furnished it minimally. A bed, a desk, a chair by the window. Chloe's room was the only one he gave real attention. Painted her favorite shade of blue, bookshelves already filled, a desk for homework positioned to catch the afternoon light. She stayed with him 3 nights a week now. The custody arrangement was generous. Vivien had not contested it, and Nathaniel had not invoked the infidelity clause. The divorce, in the end, was as clean as a divorce involving a 12-year marriage, a child, and a combined estate in the tens of millions could be. Which was to say, it was devastating in all the ways that legal documents cannot capture. Vivien took an apartment in Tribeca. She did not move in with Raphael. Their relationship had ended quietly, two people recognizing that the fire that burned between them had been fueled by what they were running from, not what they were running toward. Raphael returned to his gallery and his paintings and the honest, solitary work of making something from nothing. Vivien returned to herself, a process she described to Monica Walsh as like learning to walk again in a body I forgot I had. Chloe adjusted the way children adjust, imperfectly, bravely, with a resilience that broke Nathaniel's heart precisely because it reminded him of his own childhood adaptations. She did not cry often. She asked practical questions. Which home would hold her art supplies? Whether the cat would move with her or stay? What happened at Christmas? Nathaniel answered every question. He did not deflect. He did not say it's complicated. He gave his daughter the one thing he had never received from his own father, the truth delivered at a volume she could bear. On a Saturday morning in mid-December, Nathaniel walked into Café Lumière alone. The café was busy, the pre-holiday crowd filling the small tables, the sound of frothing milk and French jazz, and the particular hum of a Manhattan weekend morning. He ordered a double espresso at the counter and stood waiting. The brass fixtures gleamed. The chalkboard menu advertised a seasonal pain au chocolate. The window framed East 72nd Street in pale winter light. He took his espresso to the table by the window, his table, Chloe's table, and sat. Outside, a woman in a red coat walked a dog past the cafe. A taxi idled at the light. The city moved with its indifferent, magnificent rhythm, carrying forward everyone who stood still long enough to be carried. Nathaniel reached into his coat pocket and withdrew the receipt from the Archer Hotel. He had carried it for 2 years, 3 months, and 42 days. The paper was soft now, worn along the fold lines, the ink fading. He looked at it, the date, the charge, the small mechanical record of the moment his marriage became something he could name, and then he folded it one last time, set it on the table, and placed his espresso cup on top of it. He would leave it there, let the busboy clear it, let it become what it always should have been, a piece of paper, nothing more. He thought about Vivien in the kitchen that last night, her face bare, her tears honest. He thought about Chloe painting in her blue room at the Meridian, humming a song he didn't recognize. He thought about Vanessa in this same cafe, telling him to stop locking everything in drawers. He thought about his father, dead 3 years, still arranging lives from the silence of his grave. He thought about the word finally, how it had sounded in the kitchen that Tuesday morning, how Vivien's smirk had dissolved, how he had meant it not as cruelty but as the first honest syllable he had spoken in 12 years. The clock on the cafe wall read 7:15. 7:15. The time he and Vivien had shared breakfast every morning for 12 years. Not by choice, by schedule. The housekeeper set the table at 7. Vivien came down at 7:10. Nathaniel poured the coffee at 7:15. It was a ritual, not a tradition, the difference being that rituals are performed out of obligation and traditions out of love. For 12 years, 7:15 had been a time that belonged to a marriage. Now it was just a time. Nathaniel looked at the clock. He let the number register. 7:15, 7:15, and felt it release its hold. The way a hand releases a rope when the weight it carries is finally acknowledged as too heavy to keep holding. He finished his espresso. He stood. He put on his coat, left a 20 on the table, and walked to the door. The bell chimed as he pushed it open. The December air hit his face. Sharp, bright, the kind of cold that clarifies. He stepped onto the sidewalk and turned west, toward the river, toward the apartment where Chloe's room was painted blue and the windows faced a horizon he had chosen for himself. He did not look back at the cafe. He did not look at his watch. He walked into the cold Manhattan morning with his hands in his pockets and his shoulders straight, and the terrible, liberating knowledge that some doors, once signed away, were never meant to reopen, and that the only thing worse than walking through them too late was never walking through them at all. The city swallowed him. The clock on the cafe wall ticked past 7:16, and the table by the window sat empty, waiting for whoever would sit there next, carrying their own receipts, their own silence, their own version of finally.